Welcome everyone to Fermilab's Earth Day celebration this afternoon. My name's Kathy Clarkin and I have Holly Cleghorn with me today. We have a short presentation for you with a long title called Your Invisible Footprint, What Steps Can You Take Understanding Climate Change? We'll stop along the way to answer your questions and to get your ideas about the topics we're discussing. Our moderator, Sue Steyer, will monitor chat and let us know about your comments and questions. Thanks for joining us today. So our presentation today will address 4 questions. What is climate change? What causes it? What are the effects of climate change? And most importantly, what can you do to help? So, what is climate change? Let's find out what you know first. Type your ideas into the chat and we can discuss. So if you have any background knowledge, if you've learned a little bit about climate change, if you want to type your ideas into the chat, we'll give you a second to do that and then Sue will let us know.
I'm starting to get some.
Great.
It's getting hotter. Weather or climate is getting hotter, pollution, hot weather, ice melting and flooding, major changes in weather, animals may die, weather is more extreme, oceans rising, when the overall temperature of the earth gets hotter or colder, humans may become extinct over time, weirder weather,
Wow, that is
melting glaciers, weather hotter or colder. I think we have a pretty good idea here.
That's great. That is great that so many of you have this great background knowledge about climate change. That's awesome. I'm so glad that you've learned all those things already, and hopefully you'll learn a little bit more today. So let me give you the official definition from NASA. Climate change describes a change in the average conditions, such as temperature and rainfall, in a region over a long period of time. NASA scientists have observed Earth's surfaces warming, and many of the warmest years on record have happened in the last 20 years. The climate has actually always been changing, but the rate of change is really accelerating very rapidly. So we'll talk more about that as we go along. This is a graph of the change in temperature over about the last 20 years, or 150 years, I'm sorry. So you can see it's been going up and it's about 2 degrees warmer Fahrenheit than it was around 1880. So 2 degrees Fahrenheit may not seem like that much, but it represents lots and lots of extra heat when you think about how large the Earth is. So that extra heat can do crazy things to weather, like causing stronger or more frequent storms, droughts in some places, and flooding in other places. So next, let's clear up the difference between weather and climate. It can be confusing to understand the difference, but the easy way to think about it is that weather happens over a short period of time and can change quickly, even over minutes or hours. For example, if I say, it's raining right now, or look out, there's a tornado coming, that would be weather. On the other hand, climate is the weather conditions that are expected in a region at a particular time of year. Climate is all those same things that you experience as weather, like temperature, rainfall, and humidity, but it's what's typical for a place, not what's happening on a certain day. In contrast to weather, climate would be the typical amount of rain for this month, or the average number of tornadoes in a season. So then climate change is when these typical or average weather patterns change. How does the climate change? One of the ways is by heating up the planet from the greenhouse effect. Let's go over that in the next few slides. The sun shines on Earth, warming the Earth's surface. At night and even during the day, that heat radiates off the surface. Some of the heat keeps going off into outer space, but some of it gets trapped by the atmosphere and bounces back down to Earth. I've represented the atmosphere here with this gray circle. This trapping of heat is the same thing that happens in your car on a hot day. It's hotter in the car than outside because the heat gets trapped inside. This also happens in a greenhouse, and that's why it's called the greenhouse effect. Now we'll get into the causes of climate change. Again, the sun shines on Earth, warming it up. The atmosphere contains greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, CO2, and methane, CH4, and other chemicals that trap some of the heat. These greenhouse gases are also sometimes called atmospheric carbon because they contain carbon, the C in CO2, and the C in CH4. So when we talk about your carbon footprint, that's why we call it a carbon footprint. So burning fossil fuels like coal and gas and other human activities like raising livestock put more and more carbon gases into the air, trapping more and more heat. As you can see from this graph, just like climate has always been changing, so has the level of the greenhouse gas CO2 or carbon dioxide been changing in the atmosphere. But you can see that since 1950, the level of CO2 has been going up really fast. Before 1950, it had never been above this blue line. The green line represents what scientists believe is the highest level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's good for the planet. As you can see, we are already way above that line. Holly will be talking about things that all of us can do to help bring that carbon dioxide level back below this green line to a healthy level. So where do these climate change gases like carbon dioxide come from? What are their sources? Let's see if you have any ideas. Please put them into chat. Any ideas of sources of greenhouse gases?
We're starting to get some answers. Car exhaust, smoke, cars, volcanoes, factories, burning at factories, cows, livestock, oils, lawn mowers, machines, pollution. We have air pollution, airplanes. Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Manufacturing plants, jets. All right. I'm stopping.
Okay, that's wonderful. You have a lot of great ideas. Let me just sum up some of those ideas that you had here. So burning gas and diesel for cars, trucks, and airplanes. Burning coal to light buildings and provide electricity for computers and electronics. Burning fossil fuels to make products that you buy and use. Food production and waste is another big source of climate change gases. Cow farts and burps actually contain methane, and food waste also produces methane, and certain agricultural techniques release carbon dioxide. Forest fires and chopping down forests or grassland can also contribute to climate change. Your carbon footprint is the sum of all the climate change gases from all of these activities that you do. So thanks so far for all your great participation. I'm going to hand it over to Holly, but if you have any questions before Holly takes over. I'm happy to answer those now.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but I encourage you to write them in whenever you have any.
Great. We'll have time for questions at the end too, hopefully. All right, Holly.
Thanks, Kathy. Climate change affects everything on our planet because all plants and animals are interconnected and dependent on the climate. Think about what you've heard in the news or at school about some effects of climate change. If you take a look at this slide, here are some of the more drastic effects of climate change that you may be familiar with. Fires, drought, endangerment and extinction, flooding, and strong storms. Why do you think there is a bumblebee in this picture? You might be familiar with polar bears, but why would there be a bumblebee on this slide on the effects of climate change? Can you put your ideas in chat, please?
They're endangered. Flowers are dying. Bees are endangered.
Yes, absolutely.
Bees going extinct. Okay. Pollen may not be around. Their food source isn't abundant. Okay.
Awesome ideas, you guys. You're so right. So keep in mind that both this Arctic polar bear and this bumblebee from Illinois, those are all endangered creatures. Bumblebees are such an important part of our ecosystem, and scientists have found evidence that all of these have a connection to climate change. Let's continue our discussion by looking at ways that we can help make a positive impact on climate change. First, we will take a look at how the Earth has gotten out of balance with all of these extra greenhouse gases that we are emitting. And then we will take a closer look at what we can do to help with this problem. So as you can see here, in the past, our Earth was able to naturally balance the carbon and other greenhouse gases given off. But we have increased the production of these gases so much, it can no longer stay in balance without our help. We will discuss how nature helps to keep greenhouse gases in balance using carbon sinks, and our role in this, which is called mitigation. So what is a carbon sink? A carbon sink is something that absorbs more carbon than it gives off. Mother Nature has provided us with trees, oceans, prairies, and even the Earth itself to help keep these greenhouse gases in check. These natural sinks, as we call them, help to absorb these gases from the atmosphere. The word mitigation means avoiding and reducing emissions of the heat-trapping greenhouse gases. These are important actions that we take to help reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we put out into our world. What mitigation methods can you see here in these pictures? Can you put your ideas in chat? What are you seeing here in these pictures?
Someone riding a bike, electric cars, walking, someone planting trees, planting something, planting, factories with the ways to keep the fumes from entering the atmosphere, composting, reusing waste, reducing factories.
Holy cow. You guys hit all of them. That was fantastic. Great job. So the first picture, which some of you guys noticed, which was amazing, shows something called carbon capture, which is like filtering pollution from factories. Electric cars are shown there at the bottom, which maybe you've seen some of those on the road. Planting, obviously, biking or walking. And at the very bottom, some of you noticed, is a box for composting or breaking down things like overripe fruits, vegetables, and even leaves. When we throw these types of things in the garbage, it produces a lot of greenhouse gases, and that can be avoided by composting. We're now going to do a greenhouse gas activity called the carbon balance. Okay. If you take a look at my balance here, you will notice that it has a sink side to represent all of the natural ways that our Earth absorbs greenhouse gases, and a source side for those things that cause the gases to be emitted and trapped in our atmosphere. Let's begin this going back in time. We're going to go back about 200 to 300 years ago. At that time, the Earth's carbon or greenhouse gases were pretty well in balance. We're going to look at the things that started out on the sink and source side. The blocks I have here, this one represents the ocean, volcanoes, prairie and plants, food and farming, trees, and forest fires. On the source side of our balance, we will start off with volcanoes, forest fires, and farming. On the sink side of the balance, we will put oceans, forests, and prairies. Let's move ahead in time and go to the late 1800s. During this time, electricity, we'll bring up our new blocks here. Here's our electricity. It was an amazing invention, and it was starting to be used. What side do you think we should put electricity that is fueled by burning fossil fuels? In chat, can you please either write source or sink? Do you think this is a source of greenhouse gases or a sink? What do you think?
I'm getting a lot of sources. Source.
Absolutely. This electricity will go on the source side of our balance. Now, shortly after electricity, cars were invented. Where do you think we should put gas-powered vehicles? Should this be a source or a sink?
Source.
Absolutely, you got it. Okay, we're really starting to get out of balance here. As the world's population increases, we have more need for farmland and for building. So we're going to cut down some trees, and this is going to take away from some of our natural sink. Okay, to help reduce the greenhouse gases given off by cars, we could ride a bike or walk. So here's our bike, or we could walk. Now, these pieces look a little bit different if you notice. They look different because instead of a source or a sink, they are mitigations that we can take to reduce our greenhouse gases. So we'll still place these on the source side because the production of the bike, or even us breathing while we're walking, give off some greenhouse gases, but it's a huge improvement over this car. Okay, how about we plant some more plants in prairie? That will help add to our sink side and maybe even us out a little bit here. We can also replace our fossil fuel powered electricity with a more sustainable form of power. How might we make a less polluting form of electricity besides burning fossil fuels? What are your ideas? Can you put in chat a way that we could produce electricity without creating a lot of greenhouse gases?
Wind power, sun, water power, solar panels, hydroelectric. They've got it.
Awesome ideas, you guys. Wind or solar, I have solar here. That would be a great mitigation. As you can see, our carbon balance is still not quite where we want it to be. Our goal is to help get back in balance. So we're going to look at more actions and mitigations that we can take to get there. As Kathy mentioned, our carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases that are generated by our actions. We have the power to make choices that will help reduce our carbon footprint and ultimately help with the climate change problem. On this slide, you will see that I've chosen 4 things that we use each day that contribute to climate change. What can we do to help with these particular problems? Well, first, we all use lots of electricity every day. Can you put in chat some ways that you think we can help reduce the amount of electricity that we use or create cleaner electricity?
Turning lights on when not using, turning off lights.
Fantastic.
Limited screen time, turning off lights. Do not play so many video games. Okay.
I had a bunch of the same ideas you guys did. I said maybe we could turn off electronics, switch to LED light bulbs, and even change to more sustainable forms of energy like solar power. Food production, meat consumption, and food waste are all contributors to climate change. What can we do to help with this problem? Can you put in chat some ideas on what we can do to help with food waste?
Well, I'm seeing go vegetarian or vegan, don't eat so much meat, use leftovers for other things, raise your own food, smaller meals, plant-based food, compost, your own garden. Okay, that's good.
What a smart group we have today. We can eat leftovers. That was one of the ones that I put on there for sure. Eat less meat or even buy fewer products made from animals. And composting, like rotten fruits and veggies and leaves, instead of putting those things in the garbage, are just some of the ideas that I had. Next, we will need to get to work, play, and school. How can we reduce our carbon footprint in our transportation? Any ideas?
Well, we've already got carpooling, electric cars, ride bike to work or walk, a lot of walking and riding bikes, carpooling. So, yeah.
I agree. I thought as well that we can carpool, we can bike and walk. And I didn't put this on there, but we can use public transportation like trains or electronic cars, which we're starting to see more of. Finally, we all rely on factory-made goods like clothing and toys and house products. What could we do here to help with climate change? Any more ideas on what we could do when it comes to this category, this area?
Buy less, buy used, repurpose old clothing, don't buy clothes you don't need, buy less clothes, secondhand stores, donate old clothes.
Absolutely.
Share, use hand-me-downs.
Very good, you guys. We can reduce what we use, right? Buy less. We all have more than we need. We can reuse our products and give things away and use things that have been used before. And recycling, obviously, those things that we no longer use. Also, buying used is a great idea that someone gave. Climate change is a big global problem that can certainly seem overwhelming. What we want you to remember is that your choices matter and can make a difference. Making good choices, teaching others, and making Earth Day a priority every day can really make a difference. So remember this little rhyme. We have a choice to drive or to bike. We have a choice to turn off the light. We have a choice to buy or reuse. We have a choice, and now we must choose. Our choices are powerful. On behalf of Kathy and myself, we want to thank you so much for joining us today as we learned about climate change and our invisible footprint.
Thank you both. So we do have one question, and we encourage you to write a few more questions in. And our first question is, What happens when you use too much fossil fuels?
I'll take that one, I guess. So when you think about fossil fuels, most of them were buried underground. And so they're just stuck there. They're not adding any of those climate change gases to our atmosphere. But then when we mine coal or drill for oil, and then we burn it, that creates all those climate change gases like carbon dioxide and methane that we talked about. And that traps more of the heat. So burning fossil fuels is really one of the main sources of our climate change right now, from putting all those climate change gases into the atmosphere.
Okay, we have a couple of more questions, and this is maybe all we have time for. Is first, what happens when the Earth heats up too much?
So what we're talking about with this is we're talking about a couple of degrees difference, which, as we said before, may not seem like very much, but actually those couple of degrees over the entire planet can make such a huge difference. So it affects the water cycle, which you may have learned about in school. So more water gets evaporated, and then also more water comes down in the form of rain. We see more hurricanes, more drought in certain areas. So that affects then the plants and animals that are reliant on that, specific type of environment. So what we're seeing over time is we're seeing certain types of plants and animals that can no longer survive in areas where they used to because of this, along with coastlines having problems with flooding, and a variety of other different things that you may have seen in the news. So some of those big issues that we kind of talked about with those pictures.
Okay, and here's one more question. What would happen if we don't stop climate change?
Well, all those things that Holly talked about are going to get worse and worse, and that's going to affect both people and plants and animals that live on the planet. We're going to have more of those bad flooding events and droughts and bad weather and extinctions, and all those are just going to get worse unless we do something to stop that increase in temperature. But we have the power to do things to make a difference. So remember that it's not set in stone that all those things are going to get worse. We have the power to make it better.
So one last thing to piggyback on that. So if we know this is a problem, how do we make sure that there are some laws to help people to reduce their footprint?
So that's a great question. And this is something Kathy and I were talking about this as well. Remember that although you may not be at an age where you can vote, that you can write letters and emails to those who are in charge, who can make some big decisions. Within your school, you probably have power, so you could speak up about changes in your school, about using products wisely in your school. Speaking with your parents who are voters, that they could make an influence on some of those decisions as well. Kathy, do you have other ideas?
Yeah, I think kids, they talk a lot about how kids have a lot of power to change things with regard to climate. So another idea would be to talk to your school leaders about putting solar on your school, or you could make an environmental club at your school and work on things like composting and waste reduction. So lots of great ideas.
Well, we're out of time now. So thank you again for being here, and thank you to our presenters.
Thanks, everybody.
Happy Earth Day.